The last thing Commander Rask noticed before the blast doors sealed was how quiet the battlefield had become. Not peaceful, never that, but muted, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath. Smoke drifted through the shattered command hall in lazy spirals, carrying the metallic scent of burnt circuitry and something unmistakably human. Rask lay on his back, helmet cracked, staring at a ceiling that no longer belonged to any recognizable architecture. The Valoran siege had been efficient, almost elegant in its brutality, and now it was over. He tried to sit up. His body disagreed. "Well," he muttered to no one in particular, "on the bright side, at least I won't have to write the after-action report." Boots approached, too measured, too synchronized to be human. Valoran soldiers emerged from the haze, tall and armored, their weapons humming softly with contained energy. Rask raised one hand in what he hoped looked like surrender and not a lazy wave. The soldiers hesitated, as if uncertain whether to shoot him or salute him for his audacity. They chose neither. Restraint snapped around his wrist with clinical precision, lifting him gently but firmly to his feet. The Valorans did everything gently, Rask had learned. Even conquest. As they escorted him through corridors that reconfigured themselves as they walked, Rask took mental notes out of habit. Walls that pulsed faintly, floors that responded to footsteps like living things. A ship, or perhaps a palace, grown rather than built. It would have fascinated him under different circumstances, preferably ones where he wasn't a prisoner. Hours or minutes, time was slippery here, passed before they stopped. The doors before him unfolded like petals, revealing a vast chamber washed in cool light. At its center stood a figure who needed no introduction. Queen Mareth of the Valoran Empire regarded him in silence. She looked, at first glance, almost human. Tall, composed, with features sculpted in a way that suggested intent rather than accident. Only her long ears sweeping back elegantly from her head marked her as alien. They shifted slightly as she studied him, a subtle motion that made Rask acutely aware he was being measured. "So," he said before anyone could stop him, "this is how the war ends for me. I was hoping for something more dramatic. A cliff, maybe." The guards stiffened. Mirith did not smile, but something in her eyes flickered. Curiosity, perhaps, or disbelief that a captured human commander was making jokes in her throne chamber. "You are Commander Rask," she said at last, her voice calm, resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. "Architect of 3 failed counteroffensives. You are expected to beg." Rask shrugged as much as the restraints allowed. "I thought about it. Didn't seem productive." A pause followed. Somewhere deep within the chamber, a low hum shifted pitch, as if the room itself were reacting. Mareth descended the steps of her dais, each movement deliberate. When she stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see faint patterns along her skin, Rask felt an unexpected urge to straighten his posture. "Humans are strange," she said. "You face extinction with humor." "Defense mechanism," Rask replied. "Also, we're terrible at reading the room." Her long ears tilted slightly, and for reasons he couldn't explain, that small gesture made him think he might still be alive in the next hour, or at least intact. She turned, gesturing for him to follow. The restraints loosened just enough to allow movement. Rask blinked, surprised. Execution chambers, in his experience, did not usually involve guided tours. As they walked, holographic projections ignited around them. Star maps, fleet formations, vectors of invasion. Rask's strategist's mind engaged before he could stop it. His gaze snagged on a particular alignment, a pattern so wrong it was almost insulting. He stopped walking. "That formation," he said slowly, frowning despite himself, "that's bad." Mareth turned back to him. "Bad?" Rask nodded, forgetting for a moment where he was. "Not just bad, catastrophically bad. You've parked half your invasion fleet like you're daring someone to wipe it out." Silence fell again, heavier this time. The guards' weapons hummed louder. Mirith studied the projection, then looked at him, not with anger, but with sharp, unsettling interest. "Explain," she said. Rask swallowed. He had expected death today, not this. "Well," he began, choosing his words carefully, "if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die being right." Queen Mareth did not order his execution. That alone unsettled everyone involved, including Rask. Instead, she dismissed the guards with a gesture so slight it barely registered. Yet the Valorans obeyed instantly. The restraints released him completely, falling away as if embarrassed by their own existence. Rask flexed his wrists, half expecting the moment to be a test. When nothing exploded, he allowed himself a thin smile. "This is either a very clever interrogation," he said, rubbing his hands, "or the part where I wake up in a regeneration pod, missing a kidney." Mirith regarded him without visible reaction. "Your species has an unusual fixation on organ theft. We've had bad experiences." She turned back to the holographic projection. The star map expanded, layers unfolding like petals, revealing vectors and probabilities that made Rask's head ache. Valoran technology favored excess. Too much data, too many variables. Humans like simpler lies. "You said our fleet is exposed," Mirith said. "Explain without metaphor." "That takes all the fun out of it," Rask replied, then sighed. "Fine. You've positioned your primary armadas along stable hyperlanes. Predictable routes, efficient. Unfortunately, you've also created gravitational shadows large enough to be seen from very far away." Mireth's long ears shifted, angling back slightly. Interest, Rask guessed, or irritation. Hard to tell with aliens who communicated half their emotions through cartilage. "There is nothing beyond map space capable of exploiting this," she said. Rask snorted before he could stop himself. "That's what everyone says right before something unpleasant shows up." She turned to him fully now, her gaze sharp. "You mock Valoran intelligence?" "No," he said quickly. "I mock certainty. It's universal. We're very good at being wrong with confidence." Mirith studied him in silence. The chamber's ambient hum deepened, reacting to her mood or perhaps anticipating violence. Rask became acutely aware that he was standing unarmed in the heart of an enemy empire, critiquing their war strategy like a bored consultant. She gestured and the projection shifted. New data streamed in, ancient sensor echoes, distorted readings from the edges of known space. Patterns emerged that made Rask's stomach tighten. "You have seen this," he said quietly. "Yes," Mirith replied. "We have dismissed it as cosmic interference." "Of course you did," Rask said. "We call that background noise right up until it eats a colony." That earned him a look, something close to a frown, though Valoran expressions were subtler than human ones. Mirith moved closer to the projection, adjusting variables with precise movements. The simulation recalculated. Red warnings bloomed across the star map like spreading bruises. For the first time since his capture, Rask saw something crack through her composure. Not fear exactly, but recognition. "If the war continues," he said softer now, "you won't just lose ships, you'll lose time, and whatever's out there. It won't care who started what." Mirith turned to him again. She was close enough now that he could see the faint shimmer in her eyes, the way light bent around her pupils. Her long ears were angled forward, fully attentive. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Why not allow us to destroy ourselves along with your people?" Rask considered that. Then he shrugged. "I'm a strategist, not a nihilist. Also, I live here too. Technically." A pause stretched. Then unexpectedly, Mirith let out a slow breath. "You are irritatingly sincere. I've been called worse." She moved past him, ascending the dais once more. The chamber brightened, responding to her presence. Rask realized he hadn't been dismissed, which felt significant. "You will address the War Council," Mirith said. Rask blinked. "The what?" "My generals," she continued. "They will attempt to have you executed." "Ah," he said. "So we're back to that?" "Yes," she said calmly. "But first you will stand beside me." Rask stared at her, then laughed despite himself. "You know, back home we usually build up to this level of trust over several awkward meetings and at least one betrayal." Mirith's ears flicked in what might have been amusement. "Valorans prefer efficiency." As the chamber doors began to open, Rask felt the weight of what was happening settle onto his shoulders. He straightened, forcing humor into the moment, because without it, the fear might win. "Well," he murmured, "this is definitely going in the history books, assuming we survive." Mirith did not answer immediately, but as the echoes of approaching footsteps filled the hall, she said quietly, "Survival now depends on courage, Commander, not weapons." Rask swallowed. We're also not great at that, he admitted. But we're learning. The War Council chamber was larger than Rask had imagined, which he found mildly insulting. He had always pictured the room where humanity's fate would be debated as something darker, more ominous. Instead, it was bright, tiered, and alive with slow-moving light patterns that flowed across the walls like restrained auroras. Valoran design favored openness. Apparently, they preferred their arguments to echo. The generals were already there when Mirith entered, rising in perfect unison. Their long ears varied in shape and angle, each subtly signaling status, age, or temperament. Rask felt suddenly underdressed, underarmed, and very human. He offered a polite nod anyway. Old habits. This, one of the generals said immediately, his voice sharp and metallic, is the human? Rask leaned slightly toward Mirith and whispered, I miss the part where someone brings me water before the hostility starts. Mirith ignored him publicly, which he suspected was deliberate. Commander Rask will speak, she said. You will listen. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Several generals turned their gaze on Rask with open disdain. One of them tapped a control, and a projection of the human colonies, burned, fractured, scattered, appeared in the air. This creature represents an enemy who has cost us millions, another general said. Why is it not restrained? Rask raised a finger. Because I promised not to run, mostly. That earned him several looks of pure confusion. He took that as a small victory. Mirith gestured, and the star map shifted. The Valoran fleet formation appeared again, pristine and deadly. Rask stepped forward before his courage had time to reconsider. You see that alignment? He said, pointing. It's beautiful, elegant, and suicidal. Outrage flared instantly. You dare? Let him finish, Mirith said, calmly but with an edge that cut through the noise. Rask exhaled. Thank you. For the record, I'd prefer not to be vaporized mid-sentence. It ruins the pacing. He began to explain, slowly this time. He talked about gravitational bleed, about hyperspace wake signatures that didn't fade the way Valoran models assumed. He spoke of ancient human probes that vanished beyond the rim and the data they sent back just before going silent. As he talked, the projections adjusted, simulations recalculating in real time. Red indicators began to appear. One of the older generals leaned forward, his long ears twitching in irritation. These projections are hypothetical. Everything important starts that way, Rask replied, including your empire. That did it. Voices rose. Demands for execution echoed through the chamber. Rask found it oddly comforting. Anger was familiar territory. Then Mirith raised her hand. Silence fell so fast it felt artificial. If the human is correct, she said, continuing this war invites extinction. And if he is lying? A general countered. Mirith turned her gaze to Rask. Then he is the most elaborate suicide I have ever witnessed. Rask swallowed. I prefer concerned professional. Mirith stepped down from her throne and walked toward him. The chamber watched as she closed the distance. Rask suddenly became very aware of how close she was, of the faint warmth radiating from her, of the way her long ears angled slightly toward him, fully attentive. Lower your voice, she said quietly. He leaned in, heart pounding. I'm already in trouble, he murmured. How much worse can whispering get? She did not answer that. Instead, he spoke, softly, urgently, explaining the final piece. The neighboring void, the pattern humans had noticed but never fully understood. A force that followed conflict like a predator followed wounded prey. When he finished, he leaned back, realizing just how close he had been to her ear. Sorry, he added. Personal space is flexible under pressure. For a long moment, Mirith said nothing. She searched his face, his eyes as if looking for the slightest fracture of deceit. Rask met her gaze, forcing himself not to joke. This moment deserved honesty. She straightened. Stop the war, she said. The words landed like a physical shock. Immediately, the chamber erupted. You cannot. This is madness. The humans. Mirith turned slowly, her presence expanding, filling the room. This war ends now, she repeated. Any who defy this command defy me. The generals fell silent, stunned. Rask let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He leaned slightly toward her again and whispered, "You know they're going to hate me forever, right?" Her lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. "You are already hated," she replied. "Now you are also necessary." Rask nodded, nerves finally catching up with him. Story of my life. As the command transmitted across the star systems, fleets hesitated, weapons powered down, and centuries of certainty cracked. Rask stood beside an alien queen with long ears and impossible authority, realizing with a mix of awe and terror that the war had ended. And something far more complicated had just begun. The war did not end with an explosion. That disappointed Rask more than he cared to admit. Instead, it ended with silence. An awkward, galaxy-spanning pause where fleets hovered mid-formation, and soldiers on both sides waited for orders that did not come. In the Velaran capital, that silence pressed against the palace like atmospheric pressure, heavy and disorienting. Rask stood in a side chamber adjacent to the council hall, watching streams of data cascade down translucent panels. Messages arrived faster than anyone could read them. Ceasefire confirmations, confused acknowledgments, furious objections. Somewhere out there, a human admiral was probably shouting. Somewhere else, a Velaran warlord was breaking something expensive. "Well," Rask said, hands clasped behind his back, "if this turns into a misunderstanding, I'd like it officially noted that I tried." Mirith stood beside him, her posture composed despite the chaos rippling outward from her command. Her long ears shifted occasionally, subtle movements betraying the constant flow of incoming information she alone could fully interpret. "This is not a misunderstanding," she said. "This is resistance." "Ah," Rask replied, "my second favorite kind." She glanced at him. "What is the first?" "Passive-aggressive memos." That earned him a brief look, sharp, assessing, and then, unexpectedly, a quiet exhale that might have been amusement or fatigue. With alien royalty, it was always hard to tell. The chamber doors opened again, admitting a pair of Velaran officers who bowed low. "Your command is spreading," one reported. "Some fleets comply. Others request clarification. A few are ignoring it." Rask winced. "Yeah, that tracks." Mirith turned back to the displays. With a flick of her fingers, she overlaid new projections, routes shifting, formations breaking apart, warships retreating from contested zones. The elegance of it struck Rask. She wasn't just stopping a war, she was untangling centuries of habit in real time. "You realize," he said carefully, "this makes you the most controversial figure in your empire." "I already was," Mirith replied. "Now the reasons have multiplied." Another alert flared, this one different. Older, deeper. Rask leaned closer, recognizing the pattern before the system highlighted it. "There," he said. "That's it." Mirith followed his gaze. The anomaly pulsed faintly at the edge of known space, a distortion that refused to resolve into anything comprehensible. It wasn't moving fast. It didn't need to. "It has noticed the change," she said. Rask nodded. "Predators usually do when the noise stops." She turned to him then, studying his face again, as she had in the council chamber. "You could have remained silent, allowed this to happen." "Sure," he said, "but then I'd have to live with it, assuming I lived. And now?" He shrugged. "Now I get to be the guy who annoyed two civilizations into not killing each other. It's a niche skill." For a moment the tension eased, not vanished, just loosened, like armor unbuckled after battle. Mirith gestured and the panels dimmed slightly, giving the room a softer glow. "You are no longer a prisoner," she said. Rask blinked. "Is that an official statement or a motivational one?" "Official," she replied, "though some will still wish you were dead." "Also familiar," he said. "Do I get a badge?" Her long ears angled forward. "You will remain here, as an advisor." He considered that. The palace, the enemy capital, the alien queen who had just ended a war on his word. "You know," he said, "back home this would be considered a career risk." "It is also a risk for me," Mirith said quietly. That caught his attention. "You don't sound like someone who doubts her decisions." "I doubt outcomes," she replied. "There is a difference." Another alert chimed, this one from human space. Confirmation of the ceasefire, followed by a single line of text that made Rask laugh despite everything. "What?" Mirith asked. They're asking who authorized this, he said. I'm pretty sure they mean me. I've never been authorized to do anything important in my life. She regarded him steadily. You spoke the truth when it mattered. Rask's smile faded, just a little. Let's hope it keeps mattering. Outside the chamber, the palace hummed with restrained motion, with plans rewriting themselves. The war was over, but the future had arrived early and uninvited. Mirith turned back to the stars, her long ears still, her expression unreadable. Rask stood beside her, feeling the strange weight of survival settle in. Well, he said softly, what now? She did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice was calm, resolute. Now, she said, we prepare for something that does not care about our past. Rask nodded. Figures. Peace was never going to be the hard part. And for the first time since his capture, he realized he was smiling, not because he was safe, but because he was exactly where he needed to be. Peace, Rask discovered, was louder than war. The palace had not slowed after the ceasefire. It had multiplied. Corridors carried overlapping conversations in half a dozen tonal registers. Data streams whispered from the walls, and couriers moved with the nervous energy of people unsure whether history had ended or merely paused to reload. Rask walked beside Mirith through it all, trying not to look like a man who still expected to be arrested at any moment. This place needs a sign system, he muttered. I've passed this corridor 3 times. Either it's moving or I am. It is moving, Mirith replied. You are also lost. Comforting. They entered a chamber that resembled neither a war room nor a throne hall, but something in between. Star maps floated at varying depths, some ancient, some frighteningly current. Human and Valoran symbols overlapped in awkward proximity, like guests at a party who hadn't yet decided whether to shake hands. Rask leaned closer to one projection, squinting. You realize our fleet commanders are going to hate this layout. Because it is not symmetrical? Mirith asked. Because it implies cooperation, he said. That gives certain people hives. Her long ears shifted, a small, thoughtful motion. Then they will itch together. He laughed before he could stop himself. The sound echoed oddly in the chamber. Too human, too informal. Several Valoran aides glanced his way, clearly uncertain whether humor was permitted in the aftermath of galactic war. They were dismissed quickly. Mirith preferred fewer witnesses now. Rask noticed that. You're trusting me a lot for someone who met me 3 days ago? He paused. Hours? I've lost track. Time perception under stress is unreliable, she said. Also, I have reviewed your record. He winced. The part where I disobeyed orders? And the part where you were right, she replied. Repeatedly, despite inconvenience. That's one way to frame it. They worked side by side comparing data. Valoran predictive models clashed with human probability heuristics in spectacular fashion. Where Valorans layered complexity, humans cut corners. Where humans improvised, Valorans calculated. The anomaly beyond known space loomed larger with every shared insight. It's not advancing like a fleet, Rask said, pointing. It's drifting. Waiting. Observing, Mirith corrected. Great, he said. Nothing makes me feel safer than being observed by something that erased entire civilizations. She looked at him then, and for the first time since they'd met, her expression softened, not with fear, but with something closer to resolve. My people believe strength is proven through dominance, she said. Ending this war has disrupted that belief. Yeah, Rask replied gently. We had the same problem. Still do. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, you didn't look weak out there. Her long ears angled toward him. You believe that? I do, he said. Weak rulers don't take responsibility. They hide behind momentum. You stopped it. Silence settled, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unsaid. Then an alert chimed, breaking the moment. A joint fleet test. First coordinated maneuver. Rask watched the simulation play out. Human ships adjusted faster. Valoran ships anticipated further ahead. Together they created something neither could alone. Well, he said, exhaling, that's unsettlingly beautiful. Mirith allowed herself a small smile this time, unmistakable. Do humans often describe battle formations as beautiful? Only when we're trying not to panic. Another message arrived. A human captain, blunt and suspicious, requesting clarification on why a Velaran queen was now issuing joint defensive orders. Rask grimaced. Want me to handle that? Yes, Mirith said. You speak their language. He activated the channel, cleared his throat. Hi, long story short, the war's over, the universe is worse than we thought, and if we don't work together, we all die. Questions? There was a long pause, then, You always were terrible at briefings, Rask. He smiled. Nice to hear you too. When the channel closed, Mireth studied him again. You balance seriousness with levity, she observed. It disarms. It's either that, he said, or scream. She considered that. Both are understandable. As the chamber lights dimmed to a softer glow, Rask felt the strange, unfamiliar weight of purpose settle in. Not command, not survival. Something steadier. Outside, the mixed fleet began to move, not toward conquest but alignment. For the first time in generations, ships turned not against an enemy, but toward each other. Rask looked at Mirith, at the alien queen with long ears and impossible composure, and felt a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. Just so we're clear, he said, if this works, I'm taking partial credit. She inclined her head. If it fails, you will also take responsibility. He grinned. Fair. And together they watched the stars rearrange themselves, aware that peace was not an ending, but a beginning neither of them had been trained for. Yet both were ready to face. The first joint alarm sounded like nothing Rask had ever heard before. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It resonated, a deep harmonic vibration that settled into his bones and refused to leave, as if the station itself were quietly clearing its throat before delivering bad news. He looked up from the console. That's not a drill, is it? Mirith stood across the chamber, already still, already listening, her long ears angled backward, a reflex she seemed unaware of. No, she said. That is an acknowledgement. Of us, Rask asked. Of our attention, she corrected. The anomaly had changed, not in position, still lingering at the rim of mapped space, but in behavior. Its presence now distorted sensor returns closer to the core systems, not aggressively, casually, like a thought drifting too near the surface. Rask rubbed his face. I really miss problems that explode when you shoot them. You have not tried shooting this yet, Mirith said. Let's keep that as a last resort, or never. The chamber filled with officers, human and Velaran, no longer separated by rank alone, but by habit. They clustered instinctively with their own kind, exchanging glances that hovered between suspicion and reluctant trust. Rask recognized the look. It was the same one soldiers wore when handed an unfamiliar weapon and told it might save their lives. A Valoran tactician spoke first, projecting layered probability spirals. The entity does not maneuver as a fleet. It responds to density, to conflict, to convergence. A human analyst followed, voice tight. Every time two hostile forces engage within its observational range, it accelerates predictive modeling. It learns. Rask grimaced. Great. It's a critic. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mirith raised a hand and the noise subsided. We will not give it what it seeks, she said. No internal conflict. No fragmentation. A human captain crossed her arms. With respect, Your Majesty, telling two species to stop distrusting each other is not a strategy. Rask cleared his throat. It can be. It's just a bad one. Several heads turned toward him. What we need, he continued, is boredom. For it, no spikes, no drama. If it feeds on escalation, we give it routine. The Valoran tactician tilted his head. You propose monotony as defense. I propose being so uninteresting it loses focus, Rask said. Humans have used that tactic in meetings for centuries. There it was, a brief release of tension. A few humans chuckled. One Valoran's ears twitched in what Rask was starting to recognize as amusement. Mirith studied the projections, then nodded slowly. We synchronize patrols. Predictable, repetitive, no sudden massing of force. And if it doesn't work? Someone asked. Rask shrugged. Then we panic later. in an organized fashion. Orders flowed, fleets adjusted. The mixed armada moved with cautious harmony, repeating patterns, dampening energy signatures, flattening the emotional peaks of military presence. It felt wrong, unnatural to every instinct Rask had. War was noise, defense was posture. This was restraint. Hours passed, then more. The anomaly did not advance. Rask exhaled. Okay, I hate that this is working. Mireth allowed herself to sit, the first time he'd seen her do so since the alarm. The act felt significant, as if she were allowing gravity back into the room. You carry uncertainty lightly, she said. I fake it well, he replied. Inside, I'm a mess. She looked at him, really looked this time. You should rest, he laughed. That's generous and terrifying. Commander, she said quietly, you are no longer merely reacting. You are shaping outcomes. The words settled heavier than any rank he'd ever worn. Later, as the chamber dimmed and the crews rotated out, Rask stood by the viewport. The stars looked the same as they always had. That bothered him more than the anomaly. Mireth joined him. For a while, neither spoke. You ended a war, he said eventually. She corrected him gently. I interrupted it. Still, he said, most people don't get that far. Her long ears angled slightly toward him. You gave me the courage to listen. He smiled faintly. Careful. If word gets out, my reputation will suffer. Outside, the joint fleet held formation. Quiet, disciplined, alive. For the first time since the ceasefire, Rask allowed himself to believe they might survive this. Not because they were stronger, but because, against every instinct, they had chosen not to fight. And somewhere in the dark beyond the stars, something watched and waited, confused by a galaxy that had, inexplicably, decided to grow quieter. The anomaly receded without ceremony. There was no explosion, no triumphant alert, no final signal announcing victory. It simply unraveled, its distortions thinning until the sensors reported nothing but ordinary silence. The universe resumed its indifferent rhythm, as if the last weeks had been an experiment it no longer found interesting. Rask stared at the readouts for a long time before trusting them. So that's it, he said finally. We board a cosmic predator into leaving. Mireth stood beside him, hands clasped behind her back, long ears relaxed for once. It did not leave, she said. It chose elsewhere. Still counts, he replied. I've ended relationships the same way. She regarded him sidelong. Your humor remains inappropriate. Consistency is all I have. The joint fleet began its slow disengagement, human and Velaran ships peeling away in practiced patterns that no longer felt forced. Commands flowed smoothly now, without suspicion layered beneath every instruction. It struck Rask how ordinary cooperation could become once survival stopped being theoretical. Messages arrived from human space first, formal acknowledgments, cautious gratitude, an invitation to return home. Velaran responses followed, more restrained, heavy with protocol and long-term implications. Rask read them all, then closed the channel. I'm guessing this is where I get politely escorted off the throne world, he said, maybe with a medal I'm not allowed to wear in public. Mireth did not answer immediately. They had moved to a quieter observation deck overlooking the planet's luminous atmosphere. Below them, the capital glowed with layered light, no longer preparing for war. You are free to return, she said at last. He nodded. I figured. And, she continued, you are welcome to remain. That surprised him. He turned, meeting her gaze. You're serious? Yes. Rask let out a slow breath. You know that puts you in an awkward political position. I am accustomed to awkward positions, she replied. They are where change occurs. He laughed softly, then grew thoughtful. Back home, I was good at ending things. Battles, operations, sometimes careers. I never stayed long enough to see what came after. And now, she asked. Now I know stopping something isn't enough, he said. You have to replace it. Otherwise, it just starts again under a different name. Mireth inclined her head. That lesson took my people centuries. They stood in silence, watching civilian traffic trace slow arcs through the sky. No weapons, no urgency, just motion. I won't pretend this fixes everything, Rask said. Someone will always want the old war back. Yes, Mireth agreed. but they will have to argue with results. He smiled. You're going to be remembered as the queen who ended a war with 4 words. Her long ears shifted, a subtle sign of reflection. And you will be remembered as the human who whispered them into existence. That sounds dangerously flattering. Truth often is. A final message chimed. Confirmation from both sides. A permanent joint council. Shared early warning systems. Cultural exchanges. Slow, careful steps towards something that did not yet have a name. Rask felt the weight of it settle. Not fear this time, but responsibility. He was no longer a man reacting to disasters. He was part of what came next. Well, he said, breaking the moment, if I'm staying, I'm going to need clearer hallways, and maybe fewer walls that move. Mirath's lips curved, unmistakably this time. I will see what can be done. He looked out at the stars one last time, searching for the sense of impending doom that had driven him his entire career. It wasn't there. In its place was something quieter, harder to define. Hope, maybe, or simply the absence of constant dread. Funny thing, he said. I used to think courage was charging into fire. And now, she asked, now I think it's standing still when everything in you wants to run. Mirath followed his gaze into the dark. Then we are both learning. The universe remained vast and uncaring, full of threats yet undiscovered. But for the first time, Rask did not feel small within it. He felt present. And that, he realized, was enough.